By the second night, the wood in Lila Cade's dirt shelter should have been frozen solid. It wasn't. The branches were warm, not dry, not lucky. Warm, like they had been stacked beside a stove. And that impossible heat was bleeding out of the same hillside where her father had died. 3 weeks earlier, 17-year-old Lila had still believed the worst thing winter could do was bury a road. Then her uncle opened the cabin door, shoved a canvas backpack into her chest, and told her to disappear before the first storm came down. Garrett Morrow had been living in her father's house for 10 months. He called it guardianship. Lila called it theft. Her father, Evan Cade, had died the previous spring in a rockslide near the old Braddock Silver Works. The county report said it was a freak accident. One loose wall, one bad step, one body found under half a ton of broken stone. Garrett signed the papers before Lila even saw them. Then he moved into the cabin, took over the timber lease, took over the bank mail, and started treating Lila like a guest who had stayed too long. On January 7th, the sky above the Pinecross Range turned the color of bruised iron. The radio said the storm would drop below zero by midnight. That was the night Lila found an insurance envelope tucked under the sugar jar. Garrett saw it in her hand. The room went silent. Then the whiskey glass hit the wall. "What did you touch?" Lila backed toward the kitchen counter, the envelope trembling between her fingers. "It has my dad's name on it." Garrett crossed the room so fast the floorboards cracked under his boots. "It has my name on it now." He snatched the envelope from her hand and grabbed the collar of her sweatshirt. "You think this place belongs to you because Evan let you sleep in it? He was my father." Garrett's face tightened. "No, he was a problem, and now you're becoming one." He dragged her to the front door. Lila fought for one breath, one explanation, 1 second to pack. Garrett gave her none of it. She grabbed what her hands could reach: her father's lined work coat, a wool blanket, a cracked flashlight, 2 pairs of socks, and the little folding knife Evan had taught her to sharpen. At the threshold, Garrett shoved a handful of crumpled bills against her chest. $12.40. "Briar Falls is 6 miles downhill," he said. "Walk. It's 9 degrees. Then walk fast." The door slammed so hard snow shook loose from the porch roof. For a moment, Lila just stood there. Her father's cabin glowed behind the curtains. The stove was burning, the pantry was full, and the man inside it had just left her outside to die. She could have gone to the sheriff's office in town, but Deputy Nolan Pike was Garrett's hunting friend, the same deputy who had photographed her father's body, written "accidental fall" across the report, and told Lila not to make grief into suspicion. So she turned away from the road. If Garrett wanted her off the property, she would go to the one place he never checked: the North Gulch, a steep strip of state land behind the old silver works, tangled with spruce roots and deadfall, too rough for trucks and too cold for tourists. Before she climbed there, she made one stop. Rojas Supply sat at the edge of Briar Falls with one yellow light burning above the counter. Alma Rojas, who had known Evan Cade for 20 years, was counting receipts when Lila slipped through the side door. "Store's closed, sweetheart." Lila did not answer. She walked straight to the clearance barrel and pulled out a dented folding trench shovel with a cracked handle, $6. Then a torn blue ground tarp, $3.50. At the register, she put down the bills Garrett had thrown at her. Alma looked at the shovel, then at Lila's split lip, then at the storm crawling down the mountain behind the glass. "Where are you sleeping tonight?" Lila forced her voice to stay level. "Somewhere he won't look." Alma's mouth tightened, but she did not call the sheriff. In Briar Falls, people survived by knowing when the law was help, and when it was a door that opened straight back to the predator. The total came to $10.06. Alma rang it up, then slid a silver emergency blanket and 3 wax fire tabs into the bag. "Damaged stock," she muttered. Lila nodded once. By the time she reached the North Gulch, the first pellets of ice were stinging her cheeks. She found a windbreak beneath the roots of a fallen spruce and spent the first night curled inside the tarp, like an animal hiding from headlights. She did not sleep. She counted breaths. She flexed her toes. She repeated her father's survival rules in her head until morning came pale and cruel over the ridge. Cold kills quietly. Wind steals heat faster than snow. Dry feet matter more than pride. And the earth, if you can get under it, is warmer than the air trying to murder you. So Lila dug. The topsoil was iron. Every strike jarred her wrists. The cracked shovel handle chewed the skin from her palms. By noon, blood had darkened both gloves. By sunset, she had opened a narrow trench into the side of the gulch. 4 feet deep, 7 feet long, barely wide enough for her shoulders. She laid the tarp over spruce poles, pinned it with stones, then buried the roof under packed needles, dirt, and snow until the shelter vanished into the slope. When she crawled inside, the world changed. The wind disappeared. The dark pressed close. The dirt smelled like roots, clay, and old rain. It was not safe. It was not home, but it was a pocket of air the mountain had not stolen from her yet. For the next 9 days, Lila lived like something the forest had almost swallowed. She melted snow in a tin can. She shaved bark curls for kindling. She rationed 2 vending machine granola bars into pieces so small they felt imaginary. Every morning, she climbed out of the hole with numb fingers and searched for dead branches before the weather buried them. She dragged the wood back to the dugout and stacked it against the rear wall. That wall faced the old Braddock Works. No one used the mine anymore. Its entrances had been sealed after a fatal cave-in the '80s, and every kid in Briar Falls grew up hearing the same warning: stay away from Braddock, because the mountain there was hollow and hungry. On the 10th day, the storm arrived. Not snow, a white assault. 30 inches fell in 2 days. The trees vanished. The gulch became a tunnel of sound. Lila stayed inside the dugout, with the emergency blanket pulled over her head, listening to the roof groan under the weight. By the 3rd night, she had burned through almost every dry twig. She reached to the back wall for the bottom logs, already grieving the uselessness of them. They had been dragged from snow, stacked against dirt, sealed in damp air. They should have been soaked through or frozen into dead weight. Her fingers touched bark, then stopped. The bark was warm. Lila pulled her hand back like she had touched skin. She clicked on the cracked flashlight. The beam shook across the stacked branches. No frost, no white crust. The wood looked sun-dried. She pressed her palm to the pile again. Warm, not warm enough to burn her. Warm enough to be impossible. She pulled one branch down. Behind it, the clay wall was not wet like the others. It was dry, powdery, and it was breathing heat. For a long minute, Lila did nothing. The storm screamed above her. The little shelter held its breath around her. Then she picked up the folding shovel and scraped the back wall. Once, twice. The shovel struck something that was not stone. The sound was hollow, industrial. Lila froze. Then she scraped faster, clawing with the shovel until it jammed. then with her hands until her fingernails filled with warm dirt. A rusted curve appeared, then rivets, then a steel plate, then at the center of the plate a round wheel, like the handle on a submarine door. The old Braddock works had not been sealed. They had been hidden. Lila wiped her bloody palms on her jeans, gripped the wheel, and pulled. Nothing. She planted both boots against the back wall and threw her weight into it. The wheel shrieked. A flake of rust snapped loose and cut her wrist. She pulled again. The mechanism broke free with a sound that rolled through the dirt like thunder. One turn, 2, 3. Then the door breathed. Hot air blasted into her face. Not mine air, not cave air, dry air, electrical air. The kind that smelled like dust burning on a heater coil. The kind that should not exist inside a dead mountain. Lila crawled through. On the other side was a corrugated steel passage sloping downward. The walls sweated heat. The flashlight beam trembled over cable brackets, fresh bolts, and black insulated lines as thick as her wrist. Somewhere, below her, machines were roaring. She moved toward the sound. The passage opened onto a catwalk above a cavern so bright with tiny lights it looked, for one impossible second, like the stars had been buried underground. Rows of metal racks stretched across the old silver chamber. Hundreds of black machines sat stacked in steel frames. Their fans spun so hard the air vibrated. Red and green LEDs blinked in the dark. Power cables climbed the stone walls like vines. The abandoned mine was alive, and it was mining Bitcoin. Lila knew enough to understand the shape of it. Her father had fixed generators and power lines all over the county. He had explained crypto once while rewiring a ranch office. Computers burning electricity to solve invisible puzzles, turning heat into money for whoever could keep the machines running cheaper than everyone else. This place was not cheap. It was stolen. At the far end of the cavern, a thick cable trunk disappeared into a concrete service vault, marked with a faded county utility symbol. Someone had tapped the regional hydro line and hidden the load inside the mountain, a mountain-sized heater, a digital furnace, and Lila had dug her shelter against its skin. She climbed down the catwalk stairs. The heat hit her like midsummer. Sweat ran down her neck within minutes. Beside the service vault sat a rough office. Folding table, plastic chair, tool crates, a laptop with the screen sleeping blue. On the table were invoices for cooling fans, replacement hash boards, fuel filters, and private security gates. Under a coil of zip ties was a small black notebook held shut with a rubber band. Lila knew it before she touched it. Her father's field book. Lila Cade had carried it in the chest pocket of every work shirt he owned. She opened it with both hands. The last pages were not work orders. They were warnings. December 11. Unregistered draw on North Hydro Spur. Load spikes after midnight. Too large for a residence. Too steady for equipment failure. December 14. Followed the cable marker past Braddock. Fresh tire tracks near the sealed portal. Garrett's truck. December 16. Confirmed underground rig operation. Nolan Pike present. They have county access and are bypassing inspection logs. December 18. Garrett says I should forget what I saw. Says the mine is already paying back what this family owes. I am driving to Denver in the morning. State investigators first. Federal after that. I will not let them put Lila anywhere near this. The next page was blank. Evan died on December 19th. The machines roared around her. And all at once, Lila understood the shape of the last 10 months. The fast accident report. The missing bank letters. Garrett's sudden money. Deputy Pike telling her grief made people invent villains. Her father had not slipped in a dead mine. He had found a secret worth killing for. And Garrett had thrown Lila into the storm because the mountain had not finished swallowing the Cades. The roar of the server fans shifted. A wide loading door at the far end of the cavern began to rise. Cold daylight knifed across the floor. A diesel engine idled beyond it. Lila dropped behind the folding table as two men entered. The first voice was Deputy Nolan Pike's. "I told you the thermal readings are wrong. The snow over the north slope is melting too fast." The second voice made Lila's lungs stop. "Garrett, then tell the drone operator it's geothermal seep. You're the deputy. Make it sound official." Footsteps crunched over gravel. Lila pulled the tarp hanging from the table edge over herself and folded into the smallest shape she could make. Pike's voice lowered. The power company flagged another discrepancy. "Nearly a megawatt, Garrett. They are not going to ignore that forever." Garrett laughed once. "They ignored Evan." The words hit Lila so hard she almost made a sound. Pike did not laugh. Evan was one man in the wrong place. "The girl is different. Alma Rojas saw her. People know she didn't leave town on a bus. People know she ran," Garrett said. "People know she was unstable after her father died. People know winter cleans up its own mess." Silence. Then Pike whispered, "You planned it." Garrett's boots stopped inches from the table. "I planned everything after Evan wrote that notebook. The policy, the timber rights, the guardianship petition. Lila turns up dead in spring. I inherit without a fight. She never turns up. Same result with better timing." Lila pressed both hands over her mouth. The heat under the table was suffocating. Her father's notebook burned against her chest. Garrett leaned over the table, moving papers. The plastic top sagged above her head. If he looked down, she was dead. Not missing, not runaway, dead. "Swap the failed units in Rack 12, Garrett said. Bitcoin jumped again. "We are not shutting down while this thing is printing 18,000 a week." Pike swore under his breath and walked away. Garrett stayed. Lila could see the mud on his boot treads through a tear in the tarp. She counted his steps. 1, 2, 3. Then his phone rang. He answered, "Already walking." "What?" "No." "Tell the adjuster I'm at the cabin in 20. The loading door groaned. The diesel engine faded. Pike stayed somewhere among the racks, clanking tools against metal. Lila waited until his footsteps moved toward the front bay. Then she slid out. She kept low between the server racks. The notebook jammed under her coat. The fan screamed loud enough to hide one bad breath. She reached the catwalk stairs, climbed, slipped, caught herself with a hand on hot steel. Then threw herself into the passage and crawled through the round hatch back into her dirt shelter. She spun the wheels shut with everything left in her body. The roar vanished. The cold returned. Lila lay on the dirt floor, shaking so hard her teeth struck together. She had gone looking for warm firewood. She had found a murder confession waiting under a mountain. By midnight, she made the decision her father had not lived long enough to finish. She could not go to Briar Falls. She could not call the county. She could not trust any patrol car with Pike's badge on it. But 14 miles west, past the timber road and the frozen quarry, sat the Interstate 70 way station. Colorado State Patrol manned it 24 hours a day. Different agency, different radios, different chain of command. Lila wrapped the notebook in plastic cut from her tarp. She tied the bundle beneath her coat, close to her ribs. Then she crawled out of the dugout. The mountain was moonless. The snow had crusted hard enough to break under every step. She stayed below the road where the trees were thickest, using creek beds and drainage ditches to hide from headlights. Every mile stole something: feeling from her toes, strength from her knees, words from her mouth. By the 5th hour, the cold stopped, feeling sharp. That scared her more than pain. Her father had told her about that too. When freezing starts to feel gentle, you are losing. Lila slapped her own face until sparks burst behind her eyes. She pictured Garrett laughing over her grave. She pictured Pike stamping Runaway Day on the last page of her life. Then she pictured her father's handwriting. I will not let them put Lila anywhere near this. She stood up. At dawn, she heard trucks. Not birds, not wind. Trucks. The interstate. She climbed the final embankment on hands and knees, slid down the far side, and staggered toward a low brick building under fluorescent lights. The state trooper inside looked up from a coffee cup and dropped it. Lila hit the linoleum before she reached the counter. A woman's voice cut through the blur. "Stay with me. Can you hear me?" The nameplate above her badge read Alvarez. Lila tried to speak. Nothing came out. The trooper wrapped a coat around her shoulders and called for medical. Lila seized her wrist with fingers that barely moved. "No county." Alvarez bent closer. "What?" "No, county sheriff." Lila forced the bundle from inside her coat. "My name is Lila Cade. My father was murdered at Braddock Mine. My guardian is running an illegal crypto operation under the North Gulch." Deputy Nolan Pike helped cover it up. The room went still. Lila pushed the notebook into Alvarez's hands. "December 18th, she whispered. "Read that page first." Alvarez read. "Then read it again." Her face changed. Not shocked, focused, dangerously calm. She reached for the radio. "Dispatch. This is Corporal Alvarez at the westbound Scale House. I need State Bureau of Investigation, a federal cybercrime contact, and a warrant judge awake now. Do not route through Briar Falls County. Repeat, do not route through county channels." Then she looked down at the frozen girl on the floor. "You did the right thing." Lila's eyes closed. For the first time in almost 2 weeks, she let someone else stay awake. The raid began before noon. State investigators used Lila's map to reach the hidden hatch from the gulch, while federal agents hit the main Braddock portal from the service road. They did not warn the county sheriff. They did not ask Deputy Pike for assistance. They cut the stolen power at the hydro spur, and the entire mountain went quiet. Lila watched from the back seat of Alvarez's cruiser, wrapped in thermal blankets, as black SUVs rolled up the cabin driveway. Garrett came out shouting in a wool coat that had belonged to Evan. For 1 second, he looked angry. Then he saw Lila in the cruiser. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Lila lowered the window. The winter air touched her face. She did not yell. She did not cry. She just held up her father's notebook. Garrett looked at it like it was a loaded gun. Agents put him face first into the snow. At the same time, Pike was arrested at the Briar Falls substation with Evan Cade's death report, still saved on his computer, edited twice on the night before the body was discovered. Inside the mountain, investigators found 847 active mining machines, 3 stolen utility taps, falsified inspection logs, and cold wallets tied to more than $4 million in digital assets. They also found Evan's blood on a pry bar sealed inside a tool locker. The rock slide had not been an accident. It had been theater. 3 months later, spring reached the Pine Cross Range. The snow pulled back from the gulch in dirty sheets. Water ran under the spruce roots. The cabin belonged to Lila again, not because anyone was kind, but because paperwork finally stopped protecting the liar. Garrett Morrow pled guilty to second-degree murder, grand theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Nolan Pike pled guilty to obstruction, evidence tampering, and accessory after the fact. The judge called the operation a furnace built under a child's inheritance. The state welded the hidden hatch closed. The rigs were gone, the mine was silent, but the dugout stayed. On the first warm day of April, Lila walked back to the North Gulch carrying the cracked folding shovel. The roof of the shelter had sagged. The dirt walls were streaked with meltwater. A few pieces of spruce still leaned in the corner, dry as old bone. Lila set the shovel against the rear wall where the heat had first touched her hand. For a long time she said nothing. Then she took out her father's field book and placed one palm over the last written page. Garrett had believed the mountain would erase her. He had believed cold could do what lies could not. He had believed a girl with $12, a broken shovel, and nowhere to sleep would become one more sad story people shook their heads about until spring. But Lila had learned the secret of dirt. Sometimes it is a grave, sometimes it is shelter, and sometimes, if you dig deep enough, it becomes a door. She left the shovel in the dugout and climbed back toward the cabin, the sun warm on her face, the mountain finally quiet behind her. They had tried to bury Lila Cade in winter. Instead, she dug up the truth.